The historic mansion's basement wasn't meant to be a prison. But that's exactly what it became when my mother-in-law, Victoria, turned the key on my daughter Sophie during what was supposed to be a magical evening of renewed love. I should have known something was wrong when Victoria insisted on hosting her 30th wedding anniversary vow renewal at this particular venue. She'd bypassed dozens of more prestigious locations, claiming this one had the right atmosphere. Now I knew why. It had a lockable wine cellar. Children don't belong at ceremonies, she'd announced when we arrived, eyeing Sophie's careful curls and pale blue dress with obvious disdain. They fidget. They make noise. They ruin photos. She's your granddaughter, my husband Thomas protested, but Victoria waved him away. Darling, go help your father with his cufflinks. I'll make sure the little one is comfortable. I was fixing my makeup when I heard Sophie scream. The basement door was thick oak, muffling my daughter's terrified cries. Victoria had stationed her personal assistant outside, a woman who'd spent 10 years perfecting the art of polite obstruction. I'm so sorry, but Mrs. Harrison was very clear. No disruptions during the ceremony. The child has books, snacks, and a tablet. She's perfectly safe. She's 6 and terrified of the dark. I tried to push past her, but security appeared. Of course, Victoria had hired security. Mrs. Harrison instructed that no one enters until after the photographs. The guard recited. For insurance purposes. Insurance purposes. Something felt wrong beyond the obvious cruelty. Victoria was meticulous about appearances, but this level of control seemed extreme even for her. I pulled out my phone to call the police, but there was no signal. Victoria had warned us the historic building had reception issues, another red flag I'd missed. Mom? Sophie's voice was barely audible through the door. I'm scared. Check the security cameras, I told the guard. This is false imprisonment of a minor. He shifted uncomfortably. The basement cameras are temporarily offline. More red flags. Why would Victoria ensure the basement cameras were disabled today of all days? I ran to find Thomas, but Victoria had orchestrated everything perfectly. The ceremony was starting, guests were being seated, and my husband was trapped at the altar beside his father, both men smiling tensely as Victoria glided down the aisle. The celebrant began his speech about enduring love and trust, while my daughter sobbed in a basement and I counted red flags. The disable cameras, the specific venue choice, the blocked phone signals, the strategic timing. Victoria hadn't just chosen this place for its lockable basement, she was hiding something else. During the ring exchange, I slipped away from my assigned seat. The assistant was distracted by the ceremony. The guard had moved to watch the proceedings. Perfect. The basement door was solid but old. The hinges told a story of regular use, not just today's imprisonment. Someone had been coming down here often. I found a metal flower arrangement stand and went to work on the hinges. Victoria's renewal vows provided the soundtrack to my breaking and entering. I reaffirmed my commitment to honesty, transparency, and trust. The door came loose just as they reached in sickness and in wealth. Sophie flew into my arms, shaking but unharmed. The tablet Victoria had generously provided was locked to a kids' movie channel. But behind where Sophie had been sitting, partially hidden by wine racks, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A desk, a laptop, filing cabinets. This wasn't just a wine cellar, it was an office. Honey, stay right here by the stairs, I told Sophie, handing her my phone for light. Mommy needs to look at something. The laptop was password protected, but a legal document sat next to it, post-it notes marking specific passages. I recognized the header. It was Victoria and Richard's prenuptial agreement. But this copy was different from the one I'd seen during my own wedding preparations. Entire sections were altered, terms changed, clauses added. Next to it lay Richard's signature, practiced dozens of times on note paper. A half-empty glass of wine sat beside a recording device. When I pressed play, I heard Richard's voice. Should have never agreed to those terms. If I'd known about the overseas accounts, have to protect the family business. Victoria had been recording her husband's private conversations, and based on the forged signatures and altered documents, she was planning something big. What are you doing here? Victoria's assistant stood in the doorway, face pale. Mrs. Harrison will. Mrs. Harrison will what? I held up the prenup copies. Explain why she's forging her husband's signature, or why she's secretly recording him. Upstairs, applause marked the end of the ceremony. The assistant's eyes darted between me and the documents. "She promised me a percentage," she whispered. "Said once the new prenup was filed, we'd both be set for life." And locking my daughter up. Was that part of the plan? We couldn't risk anyone finding the office. Today was the only chance to swap the documents during the confusion. Heavy footsteps approached. Victoria's voice carried down the stairs. "Why is this door open? Where's the guard?" I grabbed the documents and recording device, tucking them into Sophie's backpack. "Time to go, baby." We emerged into the reception area just as Victoria descended the main staircase, her renewal gown trailing behind her like a cobra's shed skin. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. I specifically said, "No children at ceremonies," I finished, "because they might discover things they shouldn't, like fake prenups and secret recordings." Victoria's perfect mask cracked, just for a moment. In that instant, I saw what Richard had apparently never noticed. The calculating mind behind the society smile. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said smoothly. "Security." But I was already moving through the crowd toward Richard, Sophie's backpack clutched tight. Because Victoria had made one crucial mistake in her perfect plan. She'd forgotten that sometimes the people you lock away come back with keys to all your secrets. The reception guests parted as I approached Richard, their expensive champagne forgotten as they sensed impending drama. Victoria's heels clicked rapidly behind me, but she was too late. "I believe these belong to you," I said, handing Richard the documents. "Found them in your wife's secret basement office, along with some very interesting recordings." Richard's face transformed as he reviewed the documents, his celebratory smile fading into something harder, colder. Years of careful suspicion suddenly confirmed in a stack of forged papers. "The signature practice sheets are in there too," I added quietly, "along with recordings of your private conversations about the family business." Victoria reached us, her renewal gown rustling like angry snakes. "Darling, don't listen to her. She's obviously disturbed, locking herself in the basement with such ridiculous accusations." "That's not what happened." Sophie spoke up, still clutching my hand. "You locked me down there, Grandma. You said I was a liability." The crowd of wealthy guests collectively gasped. Victoria's carefully curated audience was turning against her, phones already slipping out of designer clutches to record the drama. "A 6-year-old child," Richard said softly, dangerously, "locked in a basement. Our granddaughter." "Said you could what, Victoria?" "Swap our prenuptial agreement during the renewal ceremony." "The recordings explain everything," I said, pulling out the device. "She's been collecting evidence, private conversations, planning this for months." Victoria lunged for the recorder, but Thomas caught her arm. My husband's face showed the same devastation I'd seen when he first understood his mother's true nature. "Security." Victoria called again, but this time the guards stayed back, reading the room better than she could. Richard pressed play on the device. His own voice filled the reception hall. "Can't believe the losses in Singapore. Have to protect the company. If Victoria knew about the accounts." "You were spying on me," he realized, each word falling like ice. "Using my private business discussions to amend the prenup. Planning to threaten me with exposure if I didn't sign. You were hiding assets." Victoria finally dropped her society smile, desperation showing through. "Secret accounts, offshore investments, I deserve to know." "They're not secret accounts." Richard's voice was tired. "They're emergency funds for our employees' pensions, which you'd know if you'd ever actually cared about anyone but yourself." Thomas stepped forward, still gripping his mother's arm. "The basement office. How long?" 3 months, the assistant blurted, clearly sensing which way the wind was blowing. She had me transcribe the recordings, practice his signature, prepare the documents. "And you needed today to be perfect," I added. "No witnesses, no disruptions. Just a beautiful renewal ceremony while you renewed more than just vows." Victoria straightened, smoothing her designer dress. "Everything I did was for this family, to protect our interests. You locked my daughter in a basement." I cut through her justification. "Your own granddaughter. For money?" "For control," Richard corrected, still reading through the forged documents. "It was always about control. 30 years of marriage and I never saw it." The guests were openly filming now, society's finest capturing Victoria's downfall for posterity. Her perfect renewal ceremony had become a very different kind of revelation. The police are on their way, Thomas's sister announced, her phone still raised. False imprisonment of a minor, fraud, forgery. Did I miss anything? Industrial espionage, Richard added grimly. Recording private business discussions for financial gain. That's a federal offense, Victoria. Victoria's mask cracked completely. You can't prove anything. It's my word against. Actually, the venue manager stepped forward. The basement cameras weren't really disabled. We just told you they were, as requested, but our security system recorded everything. I watched my mother-in-law collapse into a chair, her perfect world crumbling. The renewal cake sat forgotten. Its fondant promise of 30 years of trust now painfully ironic. Sophie tugged my hand. Mom, can we go home now? Yes, baby. I think Grandma's renewal ceremony is over. As the police arrived and statements were taken, I watched Thomas help his father gather the evidence. 30 years of marriage ending not with an anniversary celebration, but with handcuffs and accusations. I should have seen it, Thomas said later as we drove home, Sophie finally asleep in her car seat. All those times she was cruel to you, to Sophie. It wasn't about maintaining appearances. It was about control. Some people, I replied, thinking of Victoria's calculated smile, spend so much time maintaining their perfect image that they forget to be human. The news would break tomorrow. Society pages that should have covered a lavish vow renewal would instead detail fraud, imprisonment, and betrayal. Victoria's carefully constructed world had crumbled, all because she underestimated a 6-year-old's mother. But as I tucked Sophie into bed that night, surrounded by her nightlights because basements are scary now, I realized Victoria had made an even bigger mistake. She'd forgotten that real family, real love, isn't about control or perfect appearances or secret recordings. It's about never, ever letting someone lock your child in a basement. The police investigation was just beginning, but somewhere in that historic mansion, a renewal cake was melting, its promises as false as Victoria's perfect smile. The fallout was swift and merciless. Victoria's arrest made headlines in every society paper. Socialite's vow renewal reveals vow of vengeance, and grandmother's basement scheme leads to cellar dweller status. But the real story emerged during the investigation. Victoria's basement office contained more than just forged prenups and recorded conversations. She had been building her scheme for years, collecting dirt on every prominent family in their social circle. Insurance, she called it during her bail hearing. Everyone has secrets. I was protecting our position. The USB drives hidden in the wine racks told a different story. Photographs of indiscretions, recordings of private conversations, financial documents that were never meant to see daylight. Victoria had assembled a kingdom of blackmail, all while maintaining her image as the perfect society wife. Richard filed for divorce immediately. 30 years, he kept saying, staring at the evidence. 30 years of thinking she was just particular about appearances. The assistant turned state's evidence, revealing how Victoria had orchestrated similar schemes throughout her marriage. Previous anniversary parties, charity galas, even her children's weddings, each event had been covered for some form of manipulation or information gathering. The basement was her vault, the assistant explained. Every time she hosted an event, she'd find a way to isolate someone, record something, or swap documents. People were so busy watching the show upstairs, they never noticed what was happening below. Sophie's trauma counselor helped her process the experience through art. Her drawings showed the basement as a dragon's lair, with Victoria as a creature hoarding secrets instead of gold. But they also showed something else. Sophie drawing herself bigger than the dragon, stronger. I'm not scared of basements anymore, she announced one day, because Mom came and got me. Bad dragons can't win against good moms. Thomas found folders detailing how Victoria had manipulated his own wedding to me. She had orchestrated seating arrangements to spy on business rivals, used the reception to photograph compromising moments, all while maintaining her perfect mother of the groom smile. I'm so sorry, he told me, holding the evidence of his mother's schemes. All those times she was cruel to you. She was probably trying to drive you away because you saw through her. The society circles imploded as Victoria's files became evidence. Years of carefully maintained facades crumbled under the weight of exposed secrets. But something unexpected emerged from the ruins, truth. Families began talking openly about the things Victoria had held over them. Support groups formed, healing began. The perfect veneer of society life cracked, revealing real humans underneath. Richard established a foundation to help victims of domestic financial abuse, naming it after Sophie. Because a child's honesty brought down a dynasty of deceit, he said at the launch. Victoria's sentencing hearing came 6 months after the failed vow renewal. She arrived in designer prison orange, still trying to maintain control. "Everything I did was for status, for power," she told the judge. "You all would have done the same." "No," I spoke during the victim impact statement, "we wouldn't. Because some of us understand that love isn't about power. Sometimes it's just about being brave enough to tell the truth." Sophie insisted on making a statement too. Standing brave in her favorite blue dress, she faced her grandmother. "You locked me up because you were scared of the truth, but the truth got out anyway. That's what Mom says. The truth is like light. It finds a way out of basements." Victoria got 15 years. The society pages called it the end of an era, but for our family, it was a beginning. We held our own renewal ceremony of sorts, not with fancy vows or designer dresses, but with simple truths shared over dinner. Richard talked about rebuilding trust. Thomas shared his journey of understanding his mother's manipulation. Sophie announced her plan to be a truth detective when she grows up. And me, I kept the evidence of Victoria's schemes not for blackmail, but as a reminder. A reminder that real love doesn't need perfect appearances or secret recordings or locked basement doors. Sometimes it just needs a mother with determination, a child with courage, and the strength to let the truth out of the basement. The historic mansion was sold, its wine cellar converted into a children's library. Sophie donated her favorite books. The plaque by the door reads, "Light always finds a way." And Victoria's perfect renewal cake? We kept the topper. It sits on Sophie's desk. A reminder that sometimes the most important vows aren't the ones we renew, but the ones we make anew. To choose truth over perfection. To choose love over power. And to never ever lock away what needs to be free.